Emmett Till was born on July 25, 1941 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the son of Mamie Carthen and Louis Till. Emmett's mother Mamie was born in the small delta town of Webb, Mississippi. The Delta region encompasses the large multi-county area of northwestern Mississippi and the watershed of the Yazoo and Mississippi rivers. When Mamie was 2 years old, her family would move to Argo, Illinois, which is near Chicago. They moved as a part of the Great Migration, which was when rural black families out of the South would run to the North to escape violence, lack of opportunity, and unequal treatment. Argo had received so many Southern migrants that it was nicknamed Little Mississippi. Mamie's mother's home was often used by other recent migrants, as a way station while they were trying to find jobs and housing, which is basically like a layover. It was like a layover house because I'm assuming that the train would stop right in front of the house, so people were able to go there and probably get a cup of coffee or whatever they needed, and then they were able to catch the train to where they were going to go. Mamie largely raised Emmett with her mother. She and Louis Till separated in 1942 after she discovered that he'd been being unfaithful. Louis was also known to be abusive towards Mamie, choking her to unconsciousness and, just torturing her, taking advantage of her. And she had gotten a restraining order against him, but he kept violating it. So Louis was forced by a judge in 1943 to choose either between going to jail or going to the Army. And of course, he decided to go to the Army. And in 1945, a few weeks before Emmett's 4th birthday, Louis Till was executed for the murder of an Italian woman and the of 2 other women. At the age of 6, Emmett contracted polio, which left him with a persistent stutter. Mamie and Emmett moved to Detroit, where she met and married a man named Pink Bradley in 1951. Emmett preferred to live in Chicago, so he returned there to live with his grandmother while his mother and stepfather rejoined them later that year. After their marriage dissolved in 1952, Pink Bradley returned alone to Detroit and Mamie returned to Chicago. Mamie Till Bradley and Emmett lived together in a busy neighborhood in Chicago's South Side, near distant relatives. She began working as a civilian clerk for the U.S. Air Force for a better salary. She recalled that Emmett was industrious enough to help with chores at home, although he sometimes got distracted. His mother remembered that he did not know his own limitations at times. Following the couple's separation, Bradley visited Mamie and began threatening her. At 11 years old, Emmett took a butcher knife and told Bradley that he would hurt him if he did not leave. Emmett was normally happy, though. He would spend a lot of times with his cousin and his friends, and they would pull pranks on each other. And they also spent a lot of time playing baseball games. He was often the center of attention among his peers. In 1955, Mamie Till Bradley's uncle, 64-year-old Mose Wright, visited her and Emmett in Chicago during the summer and told Emmett stories about living in the Mississippi Delta. Of course, Emmett wanted to go and see for himself. Mose Wright planned to accompany Emmett with another cousin, and another cousin would join them later. Mose was a sharecropper and part-time minister who was often called preacher. He lived in Money, Mississippi, a small town in the Delta that consisted of 3 stores, a school, a post office, a cotton gin, and a few hundred residents, 8 miles north of Greenwood. Before Emmett departed for the Delta, his mother cautioned him that Chicago and Mississippi were 2 different worlds and that he should know how to behave in front of whites in the South. He assured her that he understood. Statistics on lynchings began to be collected in 1882. Since that time, more than 500 African Americans have been lynched by extrajudicial violence in Mississippi alone, and more than 3,000 across the South. Most of these incidents took place between 1876 and 1930. far less common by the mid-50s, but those racially motivated murders still occurred. Throughout the South, interracial relationships were prohibited as a means to maintain white supremacy. Even the suggestion of sexual contact between black men and white women could carry severe penalties for the black men. Racial tensions increased after the U.S. Supreme Court's 1954 decision in Brown v. Board of Education to end segregation in public schools. They ruled it unconstitutional. Many segregationists believed the ruling would lead to interracial dating and marriage. Whites strongly resisted the court's ruling. One Virginia county even closed all its public schools to prevent integration. Other jurisdictions simply ignored the ruling. In other ways, whites used stronger measures to keep blacks politically disenfranchised, which they had been since the turn of the century. Segregation in the South was used to constrain black folks forcefully from any semblance of social equality. A week before Emmett arrived in Mississippi, a black activist named Lamar Smith was murdered in front of the county courthouse in Brookhaven for political organizing. 3 white suspects were arrested, but they were soon released. Emmett arrived in Monee, Mississippi on August 21st, 1955. 3 days later, him and a cousin Curtis skipped church where his great-uncle Mose was preaching, and they joined some local boys as they went to Bryant's grocery meat market. The boys had went there to buy candy and hang out with friends. They were children of sharecroppers and had been picking cotton all day. The market mostly served the local sharecropper population and was owned by a white couple, 24-year-old Roy Bryant and his 21-year-old wife, Carolyn. Carolyn was alone in the front of the store that day while her sister-in-law was in the back of the store watching her kids. Curtis had left Emmett with the other kids while he went to go play checkers across the street. The facts of what took place in the store are still disputed to this day. According to what Curtis said at the time, the other boys said that Emmett had a picture of an integrated class at the school he attended in Chicago. Emmett bragged to the boys that the white children in the picture were his friends. He pointed to a white girl in the picture and referred to her as his girlfriend. According to Curtis's account, one or more of the local boys then dared Emmett to speak to Carol. However, his other cousin, Simon Wright, disputed Curtis's version of what happened on that day. According to Simon, Emmett did not have a picture of a white girl in his wallet, and no one dared him to flirt with Carolyn. In 2015, Simon Wright said in an interview, "We didn't dare him to go to the store." The white folks said that. They said that he had pictures of his white girlfriend, and there were no pictures. They never talked to me, and they never interviewed me. The FBI report completed in 2006 notes Curtis Jones recanted his 1955 statements prior to his death and apologized to Emmett Till Mobley. So the exact details of what happened that day on August 24th, 1955 is still fuzzy, but nonetheless, it is said that Carolyn went outside to retrieve a pistol from under the seat of the car. When the boys saw her do this, they left immediately. It was acknowledged that Emmett had whistled towards Bryant while she was going to her car. However, that was disputed as well. And it is unknown whether he whistled towards her or towards a checker game that was going on across the street. One of the other boys across the street went to tell Curtis what happened in the store. When the older man who was with Curtis was playing checkers heard the story, he urged the boys to leave quickly, fearing that Bryant or others would come back and retaliate with violence. Carolyn told others of the events at the store, and the story spread quickly around town. Curtis and Emmett, they both decided not to inform Uncle Mose because they feared that they was going to get in trouble. Emmett said that he wanted to go back home to Chicago. Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, was on a trip to Texas and did not return home until the 27th. Now, historians have said that Carolyn did not initially tell her husband about what happened with Emmett, and that her husband Roy was told by a person who hung around down at their store. Roy was reportedly angry at his wife for not telling him. Carol Bryant told the FBI she didn't tell her husband because she feared he would beat Emmett up. When Roy Bryant was informed of what had happened, he aggressively questioned several young black men who entered the store. That evening, Bryant, with a black man named J.W. Washington, approached a black teenager walking along a road. Bryant ordered Washington to seize the boy, put him in the back of a pickup truck, and took him to be identified by a companion of Carolyn's who had witnessed the episode with Emmett. Once they brought the young man to the store, it was confirmed by friends or parents that they had the wrong boy. Somehow, Roy had learned that the boy in the incident was from Chicago and that he was staying with Preacher, also known as Mose Wright. Many witnesses overheard Roy and his 36-year-old half-brother, J.W. John William Millam, discussing taking Emmett from Mose Wright's house. In the early morning hours of August 28, 1955, sometime between 2 and 3:30 a.m., Bryant and John William Millam drove to Mose Wright's house. John was armed with a pistol and a flashlight. He asked Mose if he had 3 boys in the house from Chicago. Emmett was sharing a bed with another cousin. There were at least 8 people in the small 2-bedroom cabin. John asked Mose to take them to the nigger who did the talking. Emmett's great aunt offered the men money, but they refused as they rushed Emmett to put on his clothes. Mose Wright informed the men that Emmett was from up north and he didn't know any better. John reportedly then asked, "How old are you, preacher?" To which Mose responded, 64. John threatened that if Mose told anybody, he wouldn't live to see 65. The men then took Emmett out to the truck. Mose said that he heard someone ask in the car if this was the boy. He heard someone respond, "Yes." When he was asked if the voice was that of a man or of a woman, Mose said it seemed like it was a lighter voice than a man's. In a 1956 interview with Look magazine in which they confessed to the killing, Bryant and Millam said they would have brought Emmett by the store in order to have Carolyn identify him, but stated they did not do so because they said Emmett admitted to being the one who had talked to her. They tied up Emmett in the back of a green pickup truck and drove toward Money, Mississippi. According to witnesses, they took Emmett back to Bryant's groceries and recruited 2 black men. The men then drove to a barn and drew. They pistol whipped him on the way and reportedly knocked him unconscious. Willie Reed, who was 18 years old at the time, saw the truck passing by. Reed recalled seeing 2 white men in the front seat and 2 black men in the back. Some have speculated that the 2 black men worked for Roy and Millam, and they were forced to help with the beating, although they later denied being present. Willie Reed said that while walking home, he heard the beating and crying from the barn. He told a neighbor, and they both walked back up the road to a water well near the barn, where they were approached by John. John asked them if they heard anything. Reed responded, "No." Others passed by the shed and they heard yelling. A local neighbor also spotted Leroy Collins at the back of the barn washing off blood off the truck and noticed Emmett's boot. John explained that he had killed a deer and that the boot belonged to him. In an interview with William Bradford Huey that was published in Look magazine in 1956, Roy Bryant and John Millam said that they intended to beat Emmett and throw him off an embankment into the river to scare him. They told Huey that while they were beating Emmett, he called them bastards, declared he was as good as them, and said that he had sexual encounters with white women. They put Emmett in the back of their truck and drove to a cotton gin to receive a 70-pound fan, the only time they admitted to being worried. thinking that by this time, early in the daylight, they would be spotted and accused of stealing, and then drove several miles along the river looking for a place to get rid of Emmett's body. They would then murder him with the pistol and use a 70-pound fan to hold his body down under the water. Mose Wright stayed on his front porch for about 20 minutes waiting for Emmett to return. He did not go back to bed. He and another man went into Money, Mississippi. They got gas and they drove around trying to find Emmett. They were unsuccessful, so they returned home around 8 a.m. After hearing from Mose that he would not call the police because he feared for his life, Curtis placed a call to LaFleur County Sheriff and another one to his mother in Chicago. Distraught, she would then call Emmett's mother, Mamie. Mose and his wife Elizabeth drove to Sumner, where Elizabeth's brother contacted the sheriff. Roy and John were questioned by LaFleur County Sheriff George Smith. They both admitted that they had taken Emmett from his great-uncle's yard, but they also had claimed that they had let him go that same night in front of the Bryant store. Roy and John were arrested for kidnapping. Word got out that Emmett was missing, and soon Medgar Evers, Mississippi State Field Secretary for the NAACP, and Amzie Moore, head of the NAACP's Bolivar County chapter, became involved. They disguised themselves as cotton pickers and went into the cotton fields in search of any information that might help find Emmett. 3 days after his abduction and murder, Emmett's swollen and disfigured body was found by two boys who were fishing in the Tallahatchie River. His head was very badly mutilated. He had been shot above the right ear, and his eye was dislodged from the socket. There was evidence that he had been beaten on the back and the hips, and his body weighted by a fan blade, which was fastened around his neck with barbed wire. He was naked, but he was wearing a silver ring with the initials LT and May 25th, 1943 carved in it. His face was unrecognizable due to trauma and having been submerged in the water. Mose was called to the river to identify Emmett. The silver ring that Emmett was wearing was removed and was returned to Wright, and next passed on to the district attorney as evidence. The circumstances surrounding Emmett's murder and timing attracted national attention to the case of a 14-year-old boy who had allegedly been murdered for whistling at a white woman. The leaders of the sheriff's office and people down south, they were trying to hurry up and bury Emmett so that his mom and other people wouldn't see what those two men did to his body. Mamie fought to get his body sent back to Chicago, and she decided to have an open casket. She wanted everybody to see what they had done to her baby. Photographs of his mutilated corpse started circulating around the country, and this caused the uproar.
The church was very calm, the line was very orderly.
I thought that pretty soon the crowd would die down. It looked like all of Chicago was there.
Well, they brought the children with them because Emmett was 14 years old. And they wanted the younger kids to see what happened to Emmett. They were mad, they were angry.
And as we were led into the church, my girlfriends and myself, we walked up to the casket, and it was covered with glass. And we all looked down. This was our friend laying, looking like a monster.
They said that about 1 in every 5 had to be assisted out of the building. They would just go into a faint.
I think Black people's reaction was so visceral. Everybody knew we were under attack. And that attack was symbolized by the attack on a 14-year-old boy.
The trial will be held in the county courthouse in Sumner, the western seat of Tallahatchie County, because this is where Emmett's body was found.
When Carolyn Bryant made her testimony, I was not in the courtroom. They had me in another room. They didn't want me influenced by the witness, I guess. But when I heard the story, I knew for two reasons that was a lie. Number one, Emmett's speech impediment under stress would not allow him to get these things out. And number two, the respect that I had put into him for womankind and for mankind, he just wouldn't come off that way. When I saw the antics that were going on in the courtroom, I could tell that everything was against us. And when the jury retired to render their verdict, I noticed that the black people who were lining the walls and the backs of the room, they were quietly leaving the courtroom. And I knew then that they knew we were not going to get a guilty verdict. And I said to my party, it's time for us to go.
The day before the start of the trial, a young black man named Frank Young arrived to tell Howard he knew of two witnesses to the crime. Levi Collins and Henry Lee Loggins were black employees of Leslie Millam, who was J.W.'s brother, in whose shed Emmett was beaten. Collins and Loggins were spotted with J.W. Millam, Roy, and Emmett. The prosecution team was unaware of Collins and Loggins. The sheriff, however, made sure to book them in jail to keep them from testifying. The trial was held in September 1955 and lasted for 5 days. Attendees remember that the weather was very hot. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Black attendees sat in segregated sections. Press from major national newspapers attended, including black publications. Black reporters were required to sit in the segregated black section and away from the white press, farther from the jury. The sheriff welcomed black spectators coming back from lunch with a cheerful, "Hello, niggas." Some visitors from the north found the court to be run with surprising informality. Jury members were allowed to drink beer, and many white male spectators wore handguns. The defense sought to cast doubt on the identity of the body pulled from the river. They said it could not be positively identified and that they questioned whether Till was dead at all. The defense also asserted that although Bryant and Millam had taken Till from his great-uncle's house, they had released him that night. The defense attorneys attempted to prove that Mose Wright, who was addressed as Uncle Mose by the prosecution and Mose by the defense, could not identify Bryant and Millam as the men who took Till from the cabin. They noted that only Millam's flashlight had been in use that night, and no other lights in the house were turned on. Millam and Bryant had identified themselves to Wright the evening they took Emmett. Wright said he had only seen Millam clearly. Wright's testimony was considered remarkably courageous. It may have been the first time in the South that a black man had testified to the guilt of a white man in court and lived. Journalist James Hick, who worked for the Black News Wire service, said that he was impressed that Wright stood to identify Millam, pointing to him and saying, "There he is," and calling it a historic moment and one filled with electricity. Mamie testified that she instructed her son to watch his manners in Mississippi, and that should a situation ever come to his being asked to get on his knees to ask for forgiveness of a white person, he should do it without a thought. The defense questioned her identification of her son in the casket in Chicago and the $400 life insurance policy she had taken out on him. While the trial progressed, LaFleur County Sheriff George Smith Howard and several reporters, both black and white, attempted to locate Collins and Loggins. They could not, but found 3 witnesses who had seen Collins and Loggins with Millam and Bryan on Leslie Millam's property. 2 of them testified that they had heard someone being beaten, blows, and cries. One testified so quietly the judge ordered him several times to speak louder. He said he heard the victim call out, "Mama, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy." Judge Curtis Swingo allowed Carolyn Bryant to testify, but not in front of the jury, after the prosecution objected that her testimony was irrelevant to Emmett's abduction and murder. It may have been leaked in any case to the jury. Sheriff Strider testified for the defense his theory that Till was still alive and that the body retrieved from the river was white. A doctor from Greenwood stated on the stand that the body was too decomposed to identify and therefore had been in the water too long for it to be Till. In the concluded statements, one prosecuting attorney said that what Till did was wrong, but that his action warranted a spanking, not murder. Gerald Chatham passionately called for justice and mocked the sheriff and doctor's statements that alluded to a conspiracy. Mamie indicated that she was very impressed with his summation. The defense stated that the prosecution's theory of the events the night Till was murdered was improbable, and said the jury's forefathers would turn over in their graves if they convicted Bryant and Millam. Only 3 outcomes were possible in Mississippi for capital murder: life imprisonment, the death penalty, or acquittal. September 23rd, the all-white, all-male jury, because both women and blacks had been banned, acquitted both defendants after a 67-minute deliberation. One juror said, "If we hadn't stopped to drink soda, it wouldn't have taken that long." So that comment right there just lets you know how serious none of them took this jury. Everybody was just nonchalant. People were joking, drinking, just being really disrespectful to Mamie and Emmett's family. And, they didn't get anything done. Nobody served any time for the stuff that they did to Emmett. In November 1955, a grand jury declined to indict Roy and John for kidnapping despite their own admissions of having taken Emmett. Emmett Till's mother, Mamie, would get remarried to a man named Gene Mobley on June 24th, 1957. She would then become a teacher, change her surname to Till Mobley, and she would continue her life as an activist, working to educate people about what happened to her son. In 1976, she would obtain a master's degree in educational administration from Loyola University in Chicago. Years later, in 1992, Mamie would have the opportunity to listen while Roy Bryant was being interviewed about his involvement in Emmett's murder. With Roy unaware that Mamie was listening, he asserted that Emmett had ruined his life. He expressed no remorse and stated, "Emmett Till is dead. I don't know why he can't just stay dead." He has some nerve to blame Emmett for ruining his life when he killed him. Like, how dare you? You killed somebody because he supposedly whistled at your wife and he ruined your life? No, you ruined your own life being racist and thinking that you above the world. He didn't get any jail time, but he definitely suffered, and he's going to continue to suffer if he hasn't already passed away. See, what he did was something so evil, and the guilt that he has from being harassed from other people to seeing other young black boys in the town that they lived in, to seeing Emmett's face being plastered all over TV, and to hear his voice and to hear his cries over and over and over again. Yeah, he was sick of hearing about it. He wanted it to go away. But no, you don't get that opportunity. You know what I mean? You did something, so you're going to have to deal with that for the rest of your days. It doesn't matter whether you want it to go away or not. It's there. You know what I mean? If you didn't want anything to do with it, you shouldn't have did it. But that's something that you wanted to do. That was something that was on your heart. And guess what? That guilt trip is going to be on your heart too for the rest of your life. And this goes for anybody that does anything evil like that. Mamie and Jean remained happily married until Jean's death from a stroke on March 18, 2000. She would then co-author her memoir titled Death of Innocence, The Story of the Hate Crime That Changed America, which was published by Random House in 2003, almost 50 years after the death of her son. Unfortunately, on January 6, 2003, she would pass away due to heart failure at the age of 81. She was buried near her son in Burr Oak Cemetery, where her monument reads, "Her pain united a nation." The U.S. Department of Justice had re-examined the case and then closed it in 2007. This was due to a witness saying that Carolyn had recanted her original statement of Emmett whistling at her or grabbing her by the waist. Of course, when she was re-questioned, she denied recanting anything. And the case was closed in 2007, but reopened again in 2018. The case was then closed in December of that year after DOJ's Civil Rights Division concluded it could not prove that Bryant had lied. When questioned directly, she adamantly denied to investigators that she had recanted her testimony. Then President Biden would sign a bill making lynching a federal hate crime into law. In my eyes, lynching has always been a hate crime, and it's never going to stop. You know, we're being lynched in different ways. People are still being lynched, though. And those people, they aren't going to face any consequences because they all feared for their life. They all were afraid, and, you know, that's what makes them do the things that they do to us, to the people that aren't really cared about, the minorities. So, you know, what we have to do as a people is keep our heads up, cross our T's and dot our I's, and try to stay out the way as best as possible, because we have those people, KKKs and the racist people, the people that don't like anything other than themselves. You know, they run in the medical field. They run in the law. So they think that they're above the law. And, you know, they're doing their thing right now. They got it on lock right now. But they don't have the final say. The man above does. So always remember that. Always remember that. They might be getting away with it now, but they'll never not face any consequences. It might not come as quick as we wanted to, but they're going to get what's owed to them for messing with God's people. I'm just saying. It's not up to me, though, to decide, so I'm not going to say any more. It's up to him. But thank you guys for listening to this video. Like and subscribe, and, you know, just wait for all the other content I got coming up. I got a lot of stuff. If you want to hear anything specifically, email me, talkswithtrue@gmail.com, and or comment below and let me know what you would like to hear a story about.